Marvin Toliver is a co-founder of Melanated Social Work and a licensed clinical social worker currently working as a therapist with the Radical Therapy Center in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Marvin is someone who has always gravitated towards leadership roles, both in his personal and professional life. At an early age, Marvin recognized the power he had to encourage and influence others and has had several positions that help cultivate that power. Marvin has served with City Miami, worked with Treasure Island Job Corps, and held various positions within education that helped shape who he is as a Black man navigating the world. Marvin makes it a point to use this power to fight for change and tackle issues of racism and white supremacy. He also uses this power to uplift the Black community, LGBTQ community, and other groups who have been marginalized in America, especially Black women. Marvin is also a creator, writer, consultant, and public speaker, and wants to encourage others to see the power within themselves and use their voices to fight for justice. Hey, everybody, it's your girl, Dr. Letitia, and we are back with another episode of Coffee and Conversations. The guest I have for you today is someone I have actually been following. Y'all know I do my internet stalking. I have been following this gentleman for quite a while. I am actually going to do something a little different and have him introduce himself. Marvin, tell the people who you are.
Cool. Thank you for having me. Good morning. My name is Marvin Toliver. I am a licensed clinical social worker here in Philadelphia. I'm always sending love, strength, and solidarity to the Lenape tribe whose stolen land that we're on right now. I use he and they pronouns. I am, what all do I do? Co-founder of Melanated Social Work. So we are 4 male social workers of color looking to change the face of mental health and the stigma of mental health in Black and Brown communities and fight for Black liberation and to dismantle systems rooted in white supremacy. I am a therapist with the Radical Therapy Center. It's a group practice here in Philadelphia. So we prioritize folks with marginalized identities. So people of color, queer folks, immigrants, anyone that has a marginalized identity. We say that we created that space for folks like us. I am a trainer, a radical educator, guest lecturer, consultant, a mentor. I've created and facilitated a group for Black men. Yeah, so I do a couple things.
You do quite a few. And I think importantly, you are also exactly what your sweatshirt says, and that is unapologetically Black. And that's actually how I started following you. I started seeing some of the things that you were doing with Melanated Social Work and also on your own page. And I was like, you know what? This is definitely a brother that I need to follow. And I just thank you so much for being willing to come on the show and talk about your journey in social work. So let's get started. And I'll start there. You know, social work is definitely a white female dominated profession still, right? All these years later. Yeah. And as much as, you know, we are really lacking people of color, we are absolutely in the profession lacking men. What made you decide to get into social work?
Yes, it's a really good question. I always have 2 answers to this question. So the first is, you know, through the different positions that I've had, different jobs that I've had, you see so much inequity, you see so much harm being caused. And the first, you know, couple of jobs that I had was with kids. Okay. So working at a summer program, I worked with what's called City Year, an AmeriCorps program that some folks are familiar with. Yes. And you see all of the inequities. You see a lot of people that don't really have voices, that society tends to kind of just throw away and say, oh, there's something wrong with them. And it's just like, well, it's actually something wrong with our system.
Right? Absolutely.
And our system was built to do exactly what it's doing. Right. And so I'm like, you know what, let me not just be a bystander anymore. Let me make sure that I'm a voice that can advocate for folks. Right. I have privilege, even though I'm a Black man. Right. I have a healthy amount of privilege. Right. And so I see privilege as almost as a responsibility. Right. When you have privilege, it's your responsibility then, when you can identify folks that don't have as much privilege, to make sure that you give them more power that you fight and advocate for those folks to make sure that they have the different opportunities, that I have.
Mhm.
The other answer that I typically give is because I needed one when I was a kid, when I was in middle school, when I was going through my own identity crisis. I just needed
Mhm.
one person to say, "Hey, you are okay the way that you are.
Mhm.
Hey, that girl didn't like you. It's okay. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It just means like maybe she just didn't like you, or whatever I needed to hear at that time,
Exactly.
instead of looking more inward and thinking that like I was the problem and that I wasn't enough.
That's so important that you say that. And I want the listeners to know, we are absolutely not saying that in order to do well in therapy and to get your healing, you have to have a therapist that looks like you. But what I am going to say is there are some things that you don't even have to question when it is an individual who understands what it feels like to be marginalized or disenfranchised, right?
Yeah.
I am working with a client, African American female client, and I'm like, all right, girl, now I got to snatch your edges. We don't have to go through, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
a full explanation of what that means. And I think that that's important. I think
Right.
that we have to start normalizing having providers that also will understand from the onset what the client is experiencing. Have
Mhm.
you found, you're in Philly, you're in a major metropolitan city. Have you found that with the pandemic, Marvin, people are starting to recognize, hey, I need to talk to somebody, specifically Black and brown males? What do you feel has been happening with that?
Absolutely. So with the pandemic, what it did was it got rid of a lot of the distractions that we typically use
That's
to not deal with the stuff that we got to deal with,
mm-hmm.
right? And so like work, right? Work is a big thing that folks use. It's like, oh no, I can't do that. I got to go to work, and I got another job, and I got another new job, and I got a side
Mm-hmm.
project, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that may just be the hustle, but that also may be people running from the issues they don't want to deal with, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, everything was closed, music events, bars, restaurants. You
You
couldn't go to
couldn't
nobody's house,
run.
right? And so you were really sitting with yourself.
That's right. That's
And
right.
so people that, tried to push and compartmentalize those thoughts were like, hey, we right here. What's good?
We ain't going nowhere.
We ain't going no, because you ain't got nothing to do. So we ain't going nowhere. And
Exactly.
so, I think a lot of clinicians will say that during the pandemic, referrals increased, caseloads increased,
Yes.
because people that, again, things that were being pushed down are now up in the forefront, and we don't
Mm-hmm.
have any distractions for them anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one thing that the pandemic kind of forced a lot of folks to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your podcast as well, Marvin. Melanated Social Work is definitely something, listeners, if you are not following, you need to follow ASAP to get your daily dose of just issues that impact us as Black and brown people.
Yeah.
What made you say, you know what, now's the time for me and three other brothers to really use our platform in this way?
Yeah. I think it was really built from community.
Mm.
And so the way that we met at Boston College, if folks have not been to Boston, Boston's a very white city. Boston College is
What?
a very white university. And so, as four men of color in social work, which
Hmm.
very white woman dominated field, is
Hmm.
like we needed to have some type of connection. And so we were part of what they call the Graduate Students of Color Association.
Okay.
Um, and we met, each other as well as other just dope individuals that went to Boston College, folks of color. And it started off as support.
Mm.
After graduation, it moved to, okay, I want to support, or we want to support each other, because we were all moving to different areas of the country. We wanted to
Okay.
support each other in that way, with professional things, but also personally, right? Because it's a
Okay.
shift moving from grad school into the workforce, especially in this field.
That's
Um,
right.
and then we were a guest on someone else's podcast, and one of our early followers were just like, "Why don't you just start your own podcast?" And so, luckily, Jesse is fantastic at setting all that stuff up. Josh had the idea. Josh also came up with the name Melanated Social Work, and what are we, 46, 47 episodes later, and tons of dope guests. Here we are.
Please, please, please keep doing what you're doing, because I think that our voices, it's time for them to be elevated,
Yeah.
right? The issues that we are dealing with, the issues that our clients are dealing with, are different than the issues that white Americans are dealing with. That's
Yeah.
just the reality, right?
Yeah.
And it's time for us to say that. I feel
Yeah.
like everyone is so focused on being politically correct and not, insulting anyone or,
Mhm.
getting canceled. Nobody wants to be canceled, right? But the reality is we have to, those of us that are doing this work have to use our platforms in that way so that
Yeah.
other people that look like us feel comfortable. What do
Mhm.
you think we have to do in the field in order for other disenfranchised folks to feel like, you know what, now's a good time, it's a safe time for me to get services? What work do we have to do as practitioners?
Yeah, I think we need to decolonize our therapy, because colonized therapy looks very formal,
Yes.
looks very quote unquote professional.
Mm-hmm.
It
Mm-hmm.
uses all of this clinical jargon.
Mm-hmm.
There's a clear power dynamic when it comes to therapist up here and client
Yes.
down there. We
Yes.
have to eliminate all of that
Mm-hmm.
because none of that looks inviting.
Mm-hmm.
None of that looks like something that I want to do. Right. But when you have someone who looks like one of us and we're laughing, I laugh all the time in therapy,
Me too.
all the time in
That's
therapy.
right. That's right.
I not allow, but I want my clients to be their authentic selves. So like
Mm-hmm.
curse away, like
Exactly.
express
Exactly.
whatever emotion that you have, be your authentic self.
Mm-hmm.
I am here as like a guide, kind of, maybe
Mm-hmm.
to teach you a couple things along the way,
Mm-hmm.
but you don't have to impress me. This is all about you. Right.
Exactly.
And so when we name that and when we start to do those things that I had mentioned before, therapy becomes much more inviting. It
Absolutely.
becomes much more like a place that's like, oh, like I got therapy with Marvin today. Like, let's
Exactly.
do it. Let's go. Like I'm ready.
Exactly.
Let's go. You
Yep.
know?
And it's no different than any other, self-care. One thing that
Mhm.
I've been trying to get, my clients and even, those who follow me to recognize is that therapy is a part of your self-care, right? Like
Absolutely.
we have to normalize it as something that you can't miss. I do not miss my massages. I don't miss my hair appointments, my facials, all my stuff to get right and stay right. But
Yeah.
therapy is a part of that, right?
Yeah.
Because we emphasize, one thing I say all the time is that Black folks master looking good. Y'all are not going to believe this, but you may, right? It took me literally 10 minutes to look like this, y'all. That's it. So it's the
Wow.
melanin, right? It's some spirituality, but it's also, we just have it, right? It's our swag.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
doesn't take us much to look the part, but we have to start to feel the part.
Yeah.
Looking good is not enough. We need to
Mhm.
feel good, and we need to feel good for real.
Yeah.
One thing I say all the time, and you tell me your thoughts on this, Marvin, is that, we have just internalized our trauma so much that
Mm.
even when a person asks, how are you? It's like an automatic response. Oh, I'm good. I'm fine. I'm chilling. I'm
Mhm.
Gucci, right? Like all of these things, but how are you for real?
Yeah.
What do you think, people need to do in order to truly check in on their loved ones in a real way?
So what I do, and it's interesting because I just had a new client start today, and
Okay.
I trick my clients first session. I'm going to say it. And so I ask them how they're feeling, and some of them are going to give me emotions, but most of them are like, "Oh, I'm good, I'm cool, I'm
Mhm,
Gucci, whatever." I'm
mhm.
just like, "Bet, no, you're not," because none of those are feelings, and I encourage
Word.
to go to www.feelingswheel.com.
Mm,
You a lovely array of emotions that you or your clients or whoever else can choose from. And I say, all right, I'm gonna ask you that question one more time.
mhm,
Pick
mhm,
one of these, pick 20 of these, however you're feeling. I want to know how you're actually feeling, not
mhm.
just this generic good, okay, whatever that you're giving me. And
Exactly.
so I, give clients that resource for family. I just pry. I'm just like, are you sure? How's it work? How's this? You said you was dealing with this before, because
Getting up
my
all in their tea.
memory
That's
turns on.
right.
And
That's right.
they're
That's
just like,
right.
dang. Yeah. And so
Right.
it's about really checking in with folks,
Mhm.
really checking in with folks, and having folks really check in with you too, because
That's right.
vulnerability unlocks relationships. And so when
Absolutely.
you check in, authentically and like in a real way with folks, that then gives them permission to also check in with you in that same way.
Absolutely. I want to thank you so much for you coming on to my web show. I honor you. I honor the work you are doing. Please keep going. We need you. 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 Please let the people know how they can get in touch with you.
Yeah, so for folks, I got a lot of things, so bear with me. So if you're in Philadelphia and looking into the Radical Therapy Center, you can go to radicaltherapycenter.com. You can also follow us on Instagram at Radical Therapy Center. If you want to get connected with Melanated Social Work, you can go to www.melanatedsocialwork.com. You can also go to Melanated Social Work on Instagram. And then for me personally, you can go on Instagram to @imazin Marvin. Toliver, TOLIVER _LCSW. Again, Toliver _LCSW, and that is on Instagram.
I want to thank you again and clap it up for Mr. Marvin Toliver and all the amazing work he is doing.
And you're doing dope work too. Thank you. I'm going to give
you.
that back to you too.
Thank you so much. I'm like, it's been 23 years in this game. It's almost time to retire. It's about that time. It's about that time. Not yet, though. It's still a little bit more work to do. Thank you so much, and we will stay in touch.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Take care.